Story 37. I came home early and found my wife with one of our friends. Part 2. Deb spent the rest of the day with Jenna, running around town after asking my permission. When they were back, Jenna came and found me and told me that her mom's car looked terrible, and Deb had admitted to Jenna that she slept in the car for a few nights. Jenna begged me to let her mom stay, crying until I finally agreed to let mom stay in the guest room. Deb was getting ready to leave but asked me what was happening with Jenna because she heard her crying in my room. I told her she had asked me to allow her to stay here. Deb had a look of surprise on her face, so I'm pretty sure she didn't plan this with my daughter. I asked Debbie if she needed a place until she could figure out something more permanent. Deb asked me if I'd be okay with it, and I told her she should thank Jenna. I turned and walked away. I could hear Deb sigh, but she went to the car and started bringing in her stuff. The guest room closet was full of Deb's clothes since I didn't want them in my closet, and I assumed the courts would frown on me if I just chucked all of it in the garbage. I told her about her things, and she said she'd found them that morning. Deb went to her room with Jenna, helping her move in. I started watching TV when I got a text from Heather. She told me that she had filed a few days earlier and had Rich served the day before. I asked her how things went, and she said Rich begged her to let him stay. They were in the reverse position because the house they lived in belonged to Heather's parents. Without kids, they would only have personal effects and bank accounts to split. With the video that I made, she was sure to get a generous settlement and alimony from Rich. Heather asked how I was doing, and I told her that Jenna was freaking out that her mom was living in a car and asked if she could stay in the guest room. Heather told me to be strong. I told her that I would. A few minutes later, Heather FaceTimed me, and we chatted for a couple of hours. Heather came off as shy, but in reality, she was just reserved until she got to know people. She was funny as hell and fun to be around. I couldn't understand why Rich was going after other women with Heather at home. Deb is very attractive, or at least she was a few weeks ago, but Heather was on a different level. I walked out into the living room and sat on the couch while I finished up my conversation. Heather point blank asked me if I wanted to hang out because she needed to get out of the house. I asked if she had something in mind, and she said she wanted to go out and get a drink or three. Her words. I asked her when and where, and she said she'd come to my house and get me in an hour. When I hung up, I found that Deb was standing in the kitchen. She had a look on her face like she wanted to say something but didn't. Walking to the bedroom, I told Deb I would be going out. If she wanted to watch Jenna, that was fine. If not, I would call the sitter. Deb said she would watch Jenna and asked how long I'd be out. I told her I didn't know but wouldn't be late. Heather knocked on the door an hour later, and I invited her in. When I informed Debbie that I was meeting Heather, I could see the anger flash in her eyes. I smiled and said she'd be here soon. You might want to be upstairs because I didn't want to have to pull her off of you. Deb stormed upstairs and didn't come down until well after we left. We had a great night and spent it talking shop about our situations. Heather told me that Rich was living in an extended stay hotel near his work. Heather and I got along quite well before D-Day. She laughed and told me that we had chosen the wrong partners. When I told her about Debbie's begging to stay in our lives and that she even offered me an open relationship, Heather choked on her wine. When I got home later, Debbie sat in the front room listening to music. I laughed out loud when I realized she was listening to our playlist. I almost expected her to wear lingerie, but she was wearing shorts and one of her comfy sleeping shirts. Debbie would steal one of my t-shirts when they got a bit old and use them for pajamas. She was in one of those. When I walked past her, Deb asked me how my date went. I stopped cold, turned, and told her that, unlike her, I could be around the opposite sex and not end up in bed with them. Then I told her she was living here at our daughter's request and not to push me. She apologized and went upstairs. I ended up letting Debbie stay at the house during the divorce proceedings. Yes, it was tough as I still had feelings for my soon-to-be ex-wife, but I was holding on to my decision to divorce her. Heather's divorce was finalized before mine because no kids were in the picture. I went to Heather's court date to be a witness for her. I ended up not having to testify. When I walked into the courtroom, Rich pointed me out to his lawyer. He got a sour look on his face, and that was that. Rich admitted to the infidelity and asked the court for a quarter of the bank assets, which he got. He was not as happy when the judge hit him pretty hard for alimony. Lucky for Rich, he was only put on the hook for 6 years. Heather got her choice of cars, so she chose Rich's expensive Mercedes and gave him her older SUV. When he left the courtroom, Rich was dejected and refused to meet my gaze. Heather thanked me for coming, and we ate dinner together. I had left Jenna with my parents. Debbie stayed at the house since she didn't have a personal life after the separation. All of our friends had systematically ostracized her and Rich. It took another month or so for my divorce to be settled. Deb didn't dispute anything since I told her that if she did, I would go scorched earth on her. I got primary custody of Jenna, and Debbie was awarded visitation and holiday rights, but I got to choose what holidays Jenna would stay with her mom. I didn't go after any money in Deb's personal accounts. I got the house and token child support since Deb was now working part-time. I didn't need it, but I felt Deb needed to pay. I did not take her to the cleaners as much as my soul wanted revenge. I figured she would need something if she were going to have Jenna part-time. I also didn't want Jenna to think I was unfair and be mad at me later in life. The day my divorce was finalized was the day of my, actually Heather's, ultimate revenge. Again, Jenna was at my parents' house, and Deb went out with our daughter for a few hours. Debbie came home early after dropping Jenna off at my parents' house. Unfortunately for Deb, Heather and I were in the bedroom tearing it up when she walked in. Debbie was sitting on the couch crying when Heather walked out of the bedroom completely naked and went to the kitchen. She grabbed a couple of beers from the refrigerator, and as she walked back, I heard her tell Debbie something about around the world making her thirsty. Just before closing the door, she asked me if I was ready for round 2. Debbie was crying in the front room until Heather left. As she walked out, she said, "How's it feel, bitch?" and left without waiting for an answer. Heather and I did not end up becoming anything other than FWB. There was too much history there. A couple of months later, Heather moved for a new job opportunity on the West Coast and offered to put Jenna and me up if we ever moved out there. Again, too much history. Debbie was devastated by what happened that night. She went from insanely angry to despondent and even somewhat scary depressed. She refused to look at me for more than a week and avoided me as much as she could. There was a day that I came home, and her stuff was in the front room. She sat on the couch, and I could tell she had been crying again, but she had a look on her face that made me curious. I put my keys and wallet down and sat across from her. We sat there for probably 15 minutes before Debbie looked at me and told me she finally understood what she had done to me. I didn't say a word, waiting for her to finish. It took another few minutes before she finally asked me again if there was any way we could stay a family. I asked her if she was okay with me having a one-sided open relationship. She admitted that she couldn't go through that again. I told her that I didn't ever think I could find it in myself to forgive her for breaking my soul. I then told her that I would never marry her again. She was crying to the point that she was hyperventilating. I didn't tell her that I had promised my daughter, mother, and father that I would give her a chance to be part of our lives, live in our home and be a mother to Jenna. She asked me again if I could ever have any feelings for her. This was sort of the make or break part for me. As much as I wanted to tell her to GTFO, Debbie was a huge part of my life and Jenna's mother. I would die for Jenna, so how could I deny her a family? And no, I couldn't rid myself of all my feelings for Debbie. I asked her what she was willing to give to the relationship. Deb had this perplexed look on her face, then got up, walked over to me, and knelt in front of me. She took my hands, looked at me, and told me she would do anything for us to be a family and that if I gave her a chance, she would win my heart back. I told her that wouldn't happen since she destroyed my heart. She got the pleading look on her face again and asked me to give her a chance. She told me that she would dedicate her life to our family. She would do everything a cheater promises and open up her life like a book to be ready whenever I wanted to look. Yeah, I know. The problem is that you didn't have to look at your daughter and tell her you were kicking her mom out of her life. Debbie and I set up some ground rules and told her that even if we ended up together again, I would never fully trust her. She would always have to live with my suspicions. She suggested that we put together a relationship contract. Still not sure what that is, but she outlined all of the things she would do and signed it. I will give her this, she never tried to deflect blame. She accepted what she did and took all the crap that came with it. It's been 6 years since D-Day. We are a family. Debbie and I are in a relationship again. We haven't defined it other than that we are a couple with a child. To be clear, I haven't defined our relationship, and I'm comfortable where we're at. We moved to a new house shortly before COVID and ended up being able to start over to an extent. Debbie and I got many smirks and teasing from our friends when we decided to live together again. She was eventually accepted back into our circle of friends. It took us nearly a year before we had any physical relationship. COVID helped in a way. Being locked up in our house as a family pushed us back into a routine that washed away a lot of the baggage. Deb started wearing her wedding ring at some point during COVID-19. I haven't mentioned it, but I have heard her refer to me as her husband on the phone. No, we have not remarried. I will not go that far. Oh, and Rich? No clue. Nobody knows what happened to him. There was a rumor that he had moved to New York, but I don't care. I know many people believe in the nuclear option of destroying your ex, and I'd agree that sometimes that is the best policy. In my situation, I simply don't think that was necessary. I love my child and I love the person that I married. No, I don't forgive her for what she did, and that will always be something we both have to live with. This works for me. And yes, Debbie is better than Heather in bed, hands down. And no, Heather wasn't kidding.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.